All right, so picture this. It's Tuesday afternoon, you're at work, and your phone buzzes. Your car just died. Completely. The mechanic says it's going to be $1,200 to fix it, and in that moment, your stomach drops because you know you don't have $1,200 just sitting around. So what do? You put it on a credit card, you borrow from a family member, maybe you even consider one of those payday loan places. And just like that, one unexpected expense has derailed your entire financial life. If that scenario made your heart rate spike even a little bit, this video is for you. My name is John, and I spend way too much time thinking about why smart, hard-working people are still living paycheck to paycheck despite doing everything they're supposed to do. If you're someone who makes decent money but still feels like you're one emergency away from financial disaster, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're talking about emergency funds. And look, I know that sounds boring as hell, but this is literally the difference between financial stability and financial chaos. Here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. Most financial advice about emergency funds is completely disconnected from reality. You've heard it a million times, right? Save 3 to 6 months of expenses. Cool, great advice. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that might as well be someone telling you to save $1 million. It feels equally impossible. So let me hit you with some numbers that should honestly make you uncomfortable. According to a 2023 report from the Federal Reserve, 37% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency expense with cash. Not $4,000, not $40,000, $400. We're talking about less than a car payment for most people. And here's what makes this even more insane. That same report found that among people making between $40,000 and $100,000 a year, these aren't minimum wage workers, these are middle-class Americans. Nearly half of them would have to borrow money, sell something, or simply couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency. Let me say that again because it's actually wild. People making $75,000 a year can't come up with $1,000 in cash. That's not a poverty problem. That's a system problem. That's a behavior problem. And honestly, that's a we've been lied to about how money actually works problem. Now, you might be thinking, okay, John, I get it. Emergency funds are important. Just tell me how much to save. But that's exactly the wrong question. And here's why. The amount doesn't matter if you don't understand why you can't save it in the first place. Because I guarantee you've tried to build an emergency fund before. You've had that moment of panic after an unexpected expense and told yourself, never again, I'm going to save up a cushion. You might have even succeeded for a month or two. But then something came up, it always does, and that money disappeared. The real question isn't how much should I save? The real question is why does my money keep disappearing and how do I stop that cycle? Here's what most people don't realize. The reason you can't build an emergency fund isn't because you don't make enough money. I mean, sometimes that's true, but usually it's because your lifestyle has expanded to your income. Economists call this the hedonic treadmill, but let me translate that into English. You make more money, you spend more money, and you end up with the exact same amount of stress. Think about it. When you got your last raise, let's say it was $5,000 a year, which is about $400 a month after taxes, where did that money go? Because I'm willing to bet it didn't go into savings. It went toward a nicer apartment, a car payment on a newer vehicle, better vacations, more frequent takeout. And none of those things are inherently bad, but what happened is your baseline expenses increased, and now you need that extra $400 every month just to maintain your current lifestyle. This is the trap. This is why people making $100,000 a year feel just as broke as they did when they were making $50,000 a year. Because the emergency fund isn't just about the money, it's about fundamentally restructuring how you think about your financial life. Let me give you a concrete example, because I think this will make it click. Let's say you make $4,000 a month after taxes. Your rent is $1,200, car payment is $400, insurance is $200, groceries are $500, utilities are $150, phone is $80, subscriptions are $50, and gas is $200. That's $2,780 in fixed expenses. You've got $1,220 left over. That's not nothing. That's actually pretty good. But here's what actually happens with that $1,220. You go out to eat a few times, $300. You buy some clothes because, you need to look professional, $150. Your friends want to go to a concert, $120. You need new tires for your car, $400. Your dog needs to go to the vet, $200. It's your mom's birthday, $100. And just like that, you've spent $1,270. You're $50 in the hole, and it's not even because you were irresponsible. It's just life. This is where it gets really interesting, because what I just described, that's not an emergency fund problem. That's a budgeting problem disguised as an emergency fund problem. Most people don't actually have financial emergencies, they have financial surprises, and the difference between those two things is absolutely critical. A true emergency is something completely unexpected and urgent. Your transmission explodes, you break your leg and have a massive medical bill, you lose your job. Those are emergencies, things you couldn't have predicted or planned for. But new tires? That's not an emergency. You knew your car needed tires eventually. Your mom's birthday? Not an emergency. It happens every single day on the same day. Annual insurance payments? Definitely not an emergency. You've known about this for 12 months. The problem is most people treat these predictable expenses like emergencies, pull money from wherever they can find it, sometimes even from what little savings they have, and then wonder why they can't get ahead. Look, I'm not trying to make you feel bad here. The system is designed to keep you in this cycle. Credit card companies want you to have just enough money to make minimum payments, but not enough to pay things off. Car dealerships want you to focus on the monthly payment, not the total cost. Subscription services make it easy to sign up and annoying to cancel. Every single aspect of modern consumer culture is engineered to separate you from your money in ways that feel painless in the moment, but devastating over time.
But here's the psychological shift that changes everything. You need to start thinking about your emergency fund not as a savings goal, but as an expense. Stay with me here, because this sounds weird, but it's actually the key to everything. Every month you pay your rent, right? That's non-negotiable. You pay your car payment, you buy groceries, you pay your utilities. These are expenses, things you must do with your money. What if you treated your emergency fund the same way? What if, instead of saving whatever's left over at the end of the month, you paid yourself first, just like you pay your landlord first? Here's how this works in practice. Let's go back to our example of someone making $4,000 a month. Instead of saving at the end of the month, you treat emergency fund contributions as a mandatory expense right at the beginning. Maybe you start with just $200 a month, 5% of your income. That money goes into a separate savings account that you do not touch the second you get paid, before you do anything else. Now you're working with $3,800 instead of $4,000. Your brain adjusts. You figure out how to make it work. And here's the thing. You will make it work because you always do. People are incredibly adaptable. If your income got cut by $200 tomorrow, you wouldn't starve. You'd adjust your spending. You'd find ways to be more efficient. You'd make it happen. But here's what makes this approach so powerful. In 6 months, you have $1,200. That's enough to cover most car repairs, most medical copays, most small emergencies. You've broken the cycle. When something unexpected happens, and it will, you don't have to put it on a credit card. You don't have to borrow money. You handle it with cash, and your life continues without derailment. And psychologically, this is massive, because every time you successfully handle an emergency with your emergency fund, you're rewiring your brain. You're proving to yourself that you can handle financial surprises. You're building confidence. You're reducing stress. A 2022 study from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that people with at least $250 in emergency savings reported significantly better financial well-being than those without, even controlling for income. It's not just about the money, it's about the security and confidence that money provides. Now you might be thinking, okay, John, but what about debt? Everyone says to pay off debt first before saving. And look, this is where most financial advice gets it completely wrong. The traditional wisdom is you should pay off all your high-interest debt before building an emergency fund, because mathematically, paying off a credit card with 22% interest gives you a better return than earning 4% in a savings account. And you know what? The math is right. But humans aren't spreadsheets. We don't make purely rational decisions. Here's what actually happens when you focus exclusively on debt payoff without an emergency fund. You make great progress for a few months, paying down your credit cards, feeling good about yourself. Then your car needs new brakes, $600. You don't have it in cash, so guess what? It goes right back on the credit card you just paid down. You're back where you started, except now you're also demoralized and ready to give up. This is why I tell people to save at least $1,000 to $1,500 first before aggressively attacking debt. That small cushion prevents you from going backwards. It's not optimal from a pure math perspective, but it's optimal from a behavioral perspective, and behavior is what actually matters. Here's another thing that nobody talks about, the emergency paradox. The better you get at managing money, the less you'll need your emergency fund for actual emergencies, but the more valuable it becomes. Here's what I mean by that. When you're bad with money, everything feels like an emergency because you have no margin for error. But as you get better, as you start budgeting for predictable expenses, as you build that $1,000 cushion into $2,000, then $5,000, you start to realize that most emergencies aren't actually emergencies. They're just expenses you didn't plan for. So you create what I call a life happens fund, separate from your true emergency fund. Maybe you set aside $100 a month for irregular expenses, car maintenance, medical co-pays, gifts, annual subscriptions, whatever. These are the things that pop up every few months and used to derail you. Now they're planned for, they're boring, they're handled.
And that means your actual emergency fund, the one that's supposed to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses, can just sit there, untouched, growing, protecting you from the truly catastrophic stuff, like job loss or major medical issues. This is where it gets really interesting, because once you have that foundation, your entire financial psychology changes. When you have 6 months of expenses saved, you stop making decisions from a place of desperation. You can turn down a job you hate because you have time to find something better. You can negotiate harder on salary because you're not terrified of being unemployed. You can handle surprise expenses without stress. Let me give you some real numbers on what this looks like. Let's say your monthly expenses are $3,500. 3 months of expenses would be $10,500. 6 months would be $21,000. I know that sounds like an absolutely insane amount of money if you're currently living paycheck to paycheck, but here's the math that should give you hope. If you save $200 a month, you'll have $10,500 in about 4.5 years. If you can do $400 a month, you're there in just over 2 years. Now, I know what you're thinking. John, I can't wait 4 years to feel financially secure. I get it, but here's the thing. Those 4 years are going to pass whether you're saving or not. The only question is whether you'll be in a better position at the end of them. And here's what I want you to understand. You don't have to wait until you hit that full 3 to 6 months before you feel the benefits. The first $500 changes your life. The first $1,000 is transformational. By the time you hit $2,500, you're handling things that would have destroyed you financially just a year earlier. I want to tell you about something that happened to me early in my financial journey because I think it'll resonate. I had been saving for about 8 months, and I had managed to scrape together about $2,000 in my emergency fund. I was so proud of it. And then my laptop died, completely bricked. And I needed a laptop for work. This wasn't optional. The old me would have panicked, would have put it on a credit card, would have spent weeks stressed about how to pay it off. But instead, I went to my emergency fund, I pulled out $800, I bought a refurbished laptop, and I moved on with my life. It took me 3 months to build that $800 back up, but I did it. And the whole time, I wasn't stressed because I knew how the system worked now. I knew I could rebuild it. That experience, that feeling of handling a crisis without going into debt, was worth more than the money itself. It proved to me that I was capable of financial stability. And once you prove that to yourself once, everything changes. Now let's talk about where to actually keep this emergency fund, because this matters more than you think. A lot of people make the mistake of keeping their emergency fund in their checking account, mixed in with their regular spending money. This is a disaster waiting to happen because you will spend it. It's just too accessible. You'll tell yourself, oh, I'll just borrow from the emergency fund this one time and pay it back next month. and then you don't, and then it happens again, and suddenly your emergency fund is gone. The solution is simple: a separate savings account at a different bank from your checking account, somewhere that pays decent interest. Right now, you can find high-yield savings accounts paying around 4 to 5%, which is actually meaningful on larger balances. But more importantly, it needs to be somewhere that's not instantly accessible. Not so hard to access that you can't get it in a real emergency, but hard enough that you won't dip into it for non-emergencies. Some people like to use the out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach and literally don't get a debit card for their savings account. They have to initiate a transfer that takes a day or two to process. That built-in delay is often enough to make you reconsider whether something is truly an emergency. Here's something that drives me crazy. People who keep their emergency fund in a regular savings account at their primary bank, earning 0.01% interest while they have credit card debt at 22%. Look, I said earlier that you should build some emergency savings before aggressively paying down debt, and I stand by that. But once you have that initial cushion, you need to be strategic. If you have $1,500 in emergency savings and $5,000 in credit card debt, you should be focused on destroying that debt. But, and this is important, while you're doing that, you should still be contributing something to your emergency fund, even if it's just $50 or $100 a month, because the goal is to build the habit and the safety net simultaneously.
Once the debt is gone, that's when you really accelerate the emergency fund. Because now all the money that was going toward debt payments can go toward building real financial security. Here's a question I get all the time. What counts as an emergency? And honestly, this is where a lot of people sabotage themselves. They save up $2,000 and then convince themselves that a vacation is an emergency because they desperately need a break. Or that a great deal on a TV is an emergency because I'll never see this price again. So let me give you the clearest definition I can. An emergency is an unexpected expense that is both urgent and necessary. Your car breaking down when you need it to get to work? Emergency. Your refrigerator dying? Emergency. A medical issue? Emergency. A vacation? Not an emergency. A sale? Not an emergency. Wanting something really badly? Definitely not an emergency. If you want those things, and you should want those things, life is meant to be enjoyed. You save for them separately. You create a vacation fund. You set aside money for fun purchases. But you do not cannibalize your emergency fund for non-emergencies, because the second you do that, you're back to being one crisis away from financial disaster. This is where it gets really interesting, and this is what I think is the most important psychological shift. Your emergency fund isn't about restriction, it's about freedom. Most people think saving money means giving things up, sacrificing, living a smaller life, but the opposite is true. When you don't have an emergency fund, you're a prisoner to your circumstances. Every decision is made from fear. You stay in jobs you hate because you can't afford to be unemployed for even a week. You don't negotiate for better pay because you're terrified of losing the offer. You accept bad deals because you don't have the luxury of walking away. That's not freedom. That's desperation dressed up as responsibility. But when you have 6 months of expenses saved, you're operating from a position of strength. You can take calculated risks. You can invest in yourself. You can leave toxic situations. You can say no to things that don't serve you. The emergency fund isn't about limiting your life. It's about expanding your options. Here's what most people don't realize. The wealthy understand this intuitively. They maintain massive cash reserves not because they're scared or conservative, but because cash gives them options. When opportunities arise, they can move quickly. When markets crash, they can buy when everyone else is selling. When a business deal requires immediate capital, they have it. Now, I'm not saying you need to keep millions in cash like some hedge fund manager, but the principle is the same at every income level. Cash is optionality. Cash is breathing room. Cash is the difference between reacting to life and creating the life you want. All right, Let's get into the actual step-by-step process of building your emergency fund, because I know some of you are thinking, this all sounds great, John, but where do I actually start? Step 1. Figure out your true monthly expenses. Not what you think you spend, not what you wish you spent, what you actually spend. Go through your bank statements for the last 3 months. Add up everything. Rent, utilities, food, transportation, insurance, debt payments, subscriptions, everything. Be honest. The number might scare you, and that's okay. You need to know the truth before you can change it. Step 2. Set your initial target at $1,000 to $1,500. This is your I can handle most common emergencies fund. It's enough to cover a car repair, a medical copay, a broken appliance. It's not enough to survive job loss, but it's enough to stop the cycle of going into debt for every unexpected expense. Step 3. Treat this like a bill. Open a separate savings account at a bank you don't normally use, one that offers decent interest. Set up an automatic transfer for the day after you get paid. Start with whatever you can actually sustain, even if it's just $50 a month. The amount matters less than the habit. Step 4. Find the money. And yes, the money exists. I know it doesn't feel like it, but it does. You need to do a spending audit. Go through every subscription, every recurring charge, every habit purchase. I guarantee you're spending $100 to $200 a month on things you don't actually value. Netflix you don't watch, gym membership you don't use, daily coffee that's become so automatic you don't even taste it anymore. I'm not saying cut everything. I'm saying be intentional. Maybe you love your daily coffee and it genuinely makes your morning better. Keep it. But maybe you're paying for Hulu, Netflix, HBO Max, and Disney Plus, and you only actually watch one of them. There's $40 a month right there. Step 5. Accelerate with windfalls. Tax refund, emergency fund. Work bonus, emergency fund. Birthday money? You get the idea. These aren't opportunities to increase your lifestyle. They're opportunities to compress years of saving into months. Now, depending on how much you can save per month, hitting that initial $1,000 to $1,500 might take you anywhere from 3 months to a year. And I'm not gonna lie, that first phase is the hardest. You're building a habit, you're not seeing dramatic results yet, and life is still throwing expenses at you. But here's what keeps you going. Every dollar you save is a dollar of freedom. Every week you stick with it is a week you're proving to yourself that you can do this. And eventually, maybe after 4 months, maybe after 8, you'll have a moment where something breaks or goes wrong, and instead of panicking, you'll just handle it. You'll transfer money from savings, you'll pay for it, and you'll move on. And in that moment, you'll understand what financial security actually feels like. Once you hit that first milestone, once you've got $1,000 to $1,500 saved, that's when you reassess. If you have high interest debt, you should probably shift focus to paying that down aggressively while maintaining a small emergency fund contribution. If you're debt-free or only have low interest debt, like a mortgage or student loans, that's when you start building toward the full 3 to 6 months of expenses. And here's the thing about that 3 to 6 month range. It's not arbitrary. 3 months is your minimum if you have a stable job, good benefits, and other safety nets. 6 months is what you want if you're self-employed, work in a volatile industry, or have dependents relying on your income. Some people even go from 9 to 12 months if they're extremely risk-averse or work in specialized fields where finding a new job might take longer.
Here's what nobody tells you about the 3 to 6 month guideline, though. It's based on your expenses, not your income. This is huge. If you make $5,000 a month, but your expenses are only $3,000, your 6-month emergency fund is $18,000, not $30,000. This is why reducing your fixed expenses is so powerful. It not only makes your current life easier, it also reduces how much you need to save for security. This is why lifestyle inflation is so insidious. Every time you increase your baseline expenses, you're not just spending more money now, you're also increasing how much you need to save for future security. The person living on $2,500 a month needs $15,000 for a 6-month emergency fund. The person living on $5,000 a month needs $30,000. Same job, same income, but one person reaches financial security twice as fast. There's this concept in behavioral economics called time inconsistency, and it explains why emergency funds are so hard to build. Basically, your present self and your future self want different things. Your present self wants to enjoy life now, buy things now, have experiences now. Your future self wants security, stability, and options. And present you always wins because future you doesn't get a vote. The only way to overcome this is to make decisions when you're in a rational, planning state of mind, not when you're hungry, tired, or stressed. This is why automatic transfers work so well. You set it up once when you're thinking clearly about your long-term goals, and then it just happens. You're removing the decision from your everyday life. Here's something that might make you uncomfortable, but I think it's important. If you're not building an emergency fund, you're making a choice. You're choosing to prioritize other things over your financial security. And that's fine. You're an adult, you can make your own choices, but you need to own that choice. You need to understand that when the emergency comes, and it will come, you chose not to be prepared for it. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because I think acknowledging this gives you power. If you're making an active choice to spend money on other things instead of saving, at least you're doing it consciously. And maybe that consciousness will shift your priorities. Or maybe it won't, and that's okay too. But you can't claim to be a victim of circumstances when you had options you chose not to take. Look, I get it. Building an emergency fund when you're already stretched thin feels impossible. It feels like one more thing you're failing at. But here's what I want you to understand. You're not failing. The system is failing you. You've been sold this idea that if you just work hard enough, you'll be fine. But nobody taught you how to actually manage the money you earn. Nobody taught you about lifestyle inflation, or the difference between emergencies and surprises, or how to pay yourself first. You're not behind because you're lazy, you're stupid, or bad with money. You're behind because you were never given the tools to succeed. But now you have them. Now you know what to do. The only question is whether you're going to do it. Here's my challenge to you. Start today, not tomorrow, not next paycheck, today. Even if all you can do is transfer $20 to a savings account, even if it feels pointless because $20 isn't going to save you from a real emergency, do it anyway. Because you're not just saving $20, you're becoming the kind of person who saves. You're proving to yourself that you can do hard things. You're taking the first step toward a completely different financial life. And then next week, do it again, and the week after that. And in 6 months, you'll look at your account and see $500 or $1,000 or whatever you've managed to save, and you'll realize something profound. You did that. You created that security out of nothing. You changed your financial trajectory through small, consistent actions. The emergency fund isn't the end goal. It's the beginning. It's the foundation that everything else is built on. You can't invest for the future if you're constantly raiding your savings for present emergencies. You can't take career risks if you're terrified of missing a paycheck. You can't build wealth if you're stuck in the cycle of crisis, debt, recovery, crisis. But once you have that foundation, once you've got 3 to 6 months of expenses saved, everything changes. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building, you're growing, you're creating the kind of financial life that gives you options and freedom and peace of mind. So here's what I want you to do right now, before you close this video. Open your banking app, create a new savings account or identify one you already have. Name it Emergency Fund or Freedom Fund or I'm never going back to that stress fund, whatever resonates with you. And then transfer something. Even if it's $10, even if it feels silly, do it right now while you're motivated, because motivation fades and habits are what actually change your life. Your future self, the one who handles the next crisis without panic, who sleeps better at night, who has options instead of obligations, that person is counting on you to start today. Don't let them down. If this video helped you, hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. Drop a comment and let me know how much you're committing to save this month. Hold yourself accountable. And remember, you're not building an emergency fund. You're building a completely different relationship with money. You're building freedom. Now, get out there and start saving.